Joining us now to discuss national security in the wake of the start of the Iran war is Andrew Harding, Senior Associate for National Security Coalitions at the Heritage Foundation. Good to have you with us this morning, Andrew. How do you rate the potential for sleeper cells or lone wolf actors relating to Iran? How concerned should people be?
Well, good morning. It's good to be here. I think Americans should be concerned. Certainly is what we're seeing with Austin and what appears to be on the surface a terror attack related to Iran. This is absolutely something in Iran's playbook, in which Iran, as the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism, has actively encouraged those sympathetic to the regime to take out lone wolf or terror cell activities that attack Americans, that are willing to infiltrate within the United States. Certainly when we've had an open border, we have no idea of who to track is coming into the country. And I'm sure Iran's been able to take advantage of some of those opportunities and people in the country. So I think Americans need to be very vigilant, to be very safe, and support local, state, and federal law enforcement with these actions. But it also shows how Operation Epic Fury is very important when it comes to ensuring that the regime cannot have the ability to expand threats into the United States and threaten the American people at home.
And what would that look like for the everyday American leading their lives in terms of supporting efforts to fight back against potential sleeper cells?
Well, the first thing, if you see something, you should say something, ensuring that local and state federal law enforcement are aware of threats, certainly being aware of your emergency numbers, but also then watching your guard as you're moving around your day. Whether that's ensuring if you're on public transportation, you're keeping an eye up from your phone. Maybe that means if you're walking around and you see something suspicious or someone that is nervous or under threat, you're willing to get law enforcement involved or assess the situation. But it's really this vigilance that'll be very important for ensuring communities are safe. And with that support of working with law enforcement, there's great opportunities to ensure that potential conflicts or potential attacks could be avoided.
And President Trump, of course, reminding everyone that the Iranian regime has instilled this ethos of death to America, and those chants have been heard. And he says this particular operation was really to take out the nuclear weapons capabilities of that regime. And in a national security sense, of course, that impacts the U.S. and the rest of the world. But some Democratic lawmakers are saying there was actually no imminent threat from Iran. So, and it also looking at U.S. Foreign policy more traditionally was positioned to stay out of other countries' affairs. But do you think imminent threat here should be the bar?
Well, I think what's important to note is Iran has been effectively in a conflict with the United States, or has been seeking it for almost 50 years, ever since the regime, the Ayatollah regime, was able to come into power. We know that Iran, as the world's state sponsor of terror, has been actively targeting and killing Americans. The White House just yesterday put out a long fact sheet detailing year after year of examples of Iranian involvement in terrorist activity that has targeted or killed Americans, resulting in hundreds, if not potentially thousands, of American deaths. That's not also to mention the consistent attacks that Iran has had towards Israel and its desire to wipe Israel off the map, as the Ayatollah and his major leadership, senior leadership, has articulated. So this is a country that has been willing to gain nuclear capabilities, ballistic capabilities, to use them, to actively target and hurt the continental United States where it can, but certainly in the region, and also wipe out Israel that had the ability to do so. So this is an active threat, and as Secretary Rubio said yesterday, if we waited for too long, it allowed Iran the ability to have too many overpowering or just such a large quantity of missiles that they can disperse and can continuously be an attack. Right now is an opportunity to prevent that imminent threat from attacking or hurting the United States or Israel for years to come.
And this particular attack on Iran also shifts the dynamics with other potential threats and national security threats around the world. China, for example, has deep ties with Iran, but also has its own ambitions to take over Taiwan, which would present its own threat to the U.S. How do you see the shifting dynamics more globally now?
Well, a few points. First, I think what Iran has experienced is the downsides of a partnership with the Chinese, to where while the United States has been able to work jointly with Israel and have Gulf partners and allies aligned even more closely with the United States in opposition to Iran, China has been willing to maybe give a handful of statements in opposition to the strikes and have called on the U.S. to stop. But that's very different to where we're not seeing a lot of support. Perhaps there's some private support, but publicly China is not really offering Iran the support that's necessary in a time of need. But secondly, it's very important with the energy markets. We know China is heavily reliant on oil from Iran. Roughly a quarter of China's energy resources come from Iran. So the United States is able to prevent that from occurring, whether that's with the Strait of Hormuz, as we're actively monitoring its status and openness, but also preventing Iran's ability to be exporting this oil that's sanctioned primarily into China. It's able to put the Chinese in a more difficult position to have the resources necessary to build up its military, to strengthen its economy, and potentially start any type of conflict in the Pacific. So these moves, while this Operation Epic Fury, is not about China, it certainly affects China.
And looking now at Russia, the Russia-Ukraine war has been going on for 4 years, and President Trump had lamented or tried to tamp down on any effect on the U.S.'s ability to defend against itself in supporting Ukraine there. How much do you think shifting the dynamics with Iran has impacted Russia?
I think the main consideration is that if you are the Russian Federation and President Putin, it should show that the United States is very serious when it wants meaningful negotiations that lead to peace. President Trump offered Iran diplomacy, and Iran refused. As Steve Witkoff said just a few hours ago, the Iranians attempted to strong-arm the Americans in negotiations and indicated that they had enough enriched uranium for nearly a dozen nuclear bombs, and that would be the starting point. That approach clearly has not been successful. Iran did not come with meaningful proposals, and here we are now with Operation Epic Fury as the main option the president has to protect American interests. The application then is that President Putin and Russia should not be misusing negotiations. They need to be coming to the table, be willing to listen to the American mediation efforts that can bring this conflict to an end. I think that's very important in order for us to get to that final step of progress that could see a meaningful solution for peace.
Andrew Harding, thank you so much for coming on this morning. Great to hear your insights.
Thank you.